Welcome to my dad's car. Enjoy!
Welcome to My Dad's Car, a podcast discussing our personal relationship with automotive nostalgia. And you know what? It doesn't even have to be about your dad's car. It can be your mum's, your grand's, your parents', guardians, or even a neighbour's. If it made an impression, let's talk about it.
Good day.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just scoffing a sandwich.
Okay. I've sent Jamie a reminder just as a quick all good for today. I've not heard back from him.
Oh, okay.
Haha! Here he is. How you doing, Jamie?
Okay. Now, I just want to just jump in immediately and say, wait, have you been recording for 15, 20 minutes? And I'm...
No. Yes, we have, because I record everything, but we're just having a chat. So I record everything and then we just cut it in. And there's nothing about you being late. So.
Oh, in which case, good morning. I'm so happy to be perfectly on time.
Were you at the unit or were you at home?
No, this is my warehouse.
Oh, you're at the warehouse.
Yeah, I can turn this around. And of course, everything's always a mess. No, there's a whole bunch of cars. So there's an RS2. So, yeah, there we go.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us. And
perfectly punctually.
Yeah. Sorry to chase you. I was like, I'll send him. I think I've got a number for you. I'll WhatsApp you, and then I did. Here we are.
I feel like you've had my number for 10 years, and I think was the original one at 8:30? Because you pushed this back. Like, you're a week late. I'm just 5 minutes late.
Yeah.
That's my fault, unfortunately.
So, thank you very much for joining us. It's 8:30 or 9 o'clock or something in the morning for you over in Pottstown.
Yeah, it's not that early. I have no excuse.
Welcome to My Dad's Car. We start these with a quick, we say for the benefit of the tape, basically to give a bit of a backstory as to how or why we've kind of got a guest on. And I reckon we probably met each other 15 years ago, maybe at Heritage. You were coming over, buying donor cars, right-hand drive cars, cutting them up and selling them to Americans who wanted right-hand drive conversions.
Yeah, although that wasn't the point. I was getting parts, bumpers, etc.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And then we had the right-hand drive parts left over, and that was it. And so I brought one or two over and converted a car myself, and people went, oh, this is cool. And it kind of, I'm not saying like we invented it or anything, but like it wasn't really a thing with Volkswagens.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just, everyone wants their cars to be different. Everyone wants their cars to have a story or be slightly unique, or that's what modifications are. And yeah, some modifications have performance gains and others are quite the opposite.
So, that's how we stumbled across each other. And then, we sort of bumped into each other probably every couple of years. Oh, you did fairly regular trips, didn't you? And then sort of...
Yes, that was the point you were making. Yes, we met many years ago through cars, and we have been friends or known each other ever since.
Indeed. And, I was telling John just before we were recording, you've ended up with some of my nan's furniture in your house, which is just super cool that some of her furniture is now the other side of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, I think you posted it. You were like,
I put it on
does
Facebook.
Anyone want to buy this or it's available? And it's literally in the same house. A sideboard, a writing table, a writing desk that folds out. Is that the right way to describe it?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, yeah, bureau or something, yeah.
Yes, there you go. A bureau and a glass curio cabinet.
That's an insane search radius that your partner has, Jamie, for bits of marketplace. Must just be the world. Mine's usually sort of 5K tops.
This was probably pre-marketplace days.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you posted it on the Facebooks.
Right, okay.
And I just so happened to be there, and we shipped a container of parts every few months. And so, yeah, it's very... Your nan had good taste. And it's now so old that it's mid-century modern age.
Yeah.
So yeah, it has a whole bunch of little curios and things on display, and it's lovingly stored. And then I have some of my own grandmother's mid-century furniture as well from Scotland.
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah, it's gone to a good home.
So yeah, unusually, I think there's only been a few guests actually where I've met someone's dad or their parents. And I've had the pleasure of meeting both your mum and your dad as well. So I'm sure they'll come up in conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your earliest motoring memory or car memory?
I can't believe we're straight into this. I thought we were just chatting and catching up on fables. So my dad worked for Hewlett-Packard, but he kind of DIY'd a lot. And my mum was driving minis, like original, like 1970s, 80s minis.
Okay.
So bombing around in the back of those, and then the mini Metro.
Yeah.
Huge step up from an original mini. Americans have no idea what they are. Unbelievable, the non-cult following that mini Metros have ended up with globally. For people that don't know, British Leyland, just the pinnacle of 1980s Margaret Thatcher era British. It's brown with brown and brown, and it's kind of just square, and it's so unhip. But now I look fondly back at them. And so, yeah, I remember my dad, the motor would go, or when we brought in unleaded petrol.
Yeah.
Changing the valves.
I used to be 4-star, didn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, we were just eating all that lead and walking down the high streets, worrying about the IRA or whatever. So that's my earliest memories. And then my grandparents as well. My mum's mum and dad just had the coolest cars. I have an aerial photo from, it must be the very early 80s in my office, of my grandma's Mark I Scirocco sitting outside their house.
Oh, awesome.
And my granddad always had silver Mercedes coupes.
Nice.
Which at the time was just grandpa. And he didn't live a flamboyant lifestyle or anything, but like that was it. He just had his silver Mercedes coupe. That's my memories.
Fantastic. So your dad was driving minis and metros as well, is that right?
No, my dad had company cars.
Oh, okay.
And you could kind of see his progression. He went to university to be an engineer and came from like really humble beginnings and just kind of worked his butt off. And I kind of remember he had a Sierra, which was a very company car. And having a company car was still like a good thing, but in the UK it was a thing. And then he probably went up to a BMW 520, which was the lowest 6-cylinder. If I think about it right, it was probably a J plate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that would be 91, 92.
E34.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, it's a great car. I remember, that's when I start remembering the cars. And yeah, he just kind of went with that. And then finally, he went to work at IBM, and they gave him an allowance instead of a company car.
Okay.
Because in the UK, it was kind of, you had a company car, but you had to kind of pick.
Yeah.
Like, here's your choice. Like, your lower level, so you can have a Sierra, or you can have the Vauxhall Chevy equivalent. And then you could go up and like, okay, you can have whatever else. And so he took the money and he bought a Lotus Elise. Because they weren't expensive particularly. So instead of, your BMW 3 or 5 Series, whatever. So he did that, and he just drove to work every day with his laptop on the passenger seat. And I just love that about him. And he still owns it.
Oh, really?
It's a Mark I, an early Series 1. And he's got like 100-some thousand miles on it.
Wow.
And of course, he knew all the people. So there was the guy that developed them, and he had the test one, and he had higher mileage. And my dad's like, no, it's really economical. It's very light, so it doesn't use brakes. It's got the K-series engine, so oil filters and things are cheap. I'm like, this is great. I feel like you've made your commute either fun or hellish.
I'm trying to imagine if there's space for the suit jacket on the coat hanger in these.
Exactly.
Like normal company cars.
No, that's exactly it. Just got the laptop, briefcase, whatever, and just I'm like, you won that system.
What color is it?
Silver.
Okay.
Silver, dark blue roof, dark blue interior. All right. While we're talking about dads, then I always said to him, look, when you want to sell it, and once it's old enough to come to the US, I'd like first refusal, please, if I can. I'll pay,
Yeah.
And they moved house, and he's got a Mark IV Golf, really, really cool Mark IV Golf, as a daily driver. So he's kept it the same. He's like, I don't want a car payment. So he just kind of took out the back seats. And I've always said it, and I said it again this year. I went to visit, and they're redoing the house himself, kind of DIY. And it had dust on it, and a cat had been sleeping on the roof or something. It's under a carport. I said, look, whenever it's time, And it's whatever that song. It's not Counting Crows, or it's like when you coming home, son. I don't know when. We'll have a yeah. And he's like, yeah, I think it's time. I'm getting on a little bit. I'm not really driving it so much. Like, no, don't say that. Sell it to me because you want to buy something different, not because you're like, yeah, maybe I'm getting on in days.
I don't want to hear that.
No. And I don't think he meant it that way, but I just took it as this like heartbreaking, like, no. You have to keep it now forever and just keep driving it. I'm actually going to tear up a tiny bit about it. So I will be buying it at some point, but that's my dad's car. That's the one.
Is it eligible for import now?
It is. It's over 25 years old-ish, I think, just about. No, it must be, because I think they bought it maybe one model year after it came out or so. So yeah, definitely eligible. That wasn't the point. If it wasn't eligible, for people who don't know, cars have to be 25 years to come into the USA permanently. It's a weird rule, but that's the world we live in. And so, yeah, if it was 20 years old and he had to sell it or he was ready to get rid of it, I would store it somewhere or say to him, keep driving it for 5 years. He rebuilt a Lotus Elan, I think a Series 2 or 3, maybe a 4. And when he retired, he moved to near Goodwood, which I thought was quite a coincidence that he was a couple of villages over, so he would go out to the breakfast meets.
Yeah.
And somehow the Elise would sneak him into a supercar.
Okay.
So he had it worked out that the Elan would get him into old timers. He has a Honda VFR, so that would get him into motorbikes. And the Elise would sneak him in on supercar, which is total BS. But the guy at the gate would see him, and he's like, that's it. Every week he can qualify, and then when they do 90s or whatever, new cars, the Golf GTI got him in, and that was it.
Fantastic.
I was just going to, sorry, before we move on, I was just going to say, I didn't realise that's the ruling for 25 years, the import thing. It must be sort of hitting a real sweet spot now for stuff that was, made 25 years ago.
Yeah, I think we've been there sort of 5 years now or so, because we went into the Skylines and then the Golf Rallies. That was a big one. And RS2s. We literally had, I think, a customer, the first RS2 we brought was on the boat during its birthday.
Wow.
It turned 25 on the boat. Because they don't care. It's done by month.
Yeah.
And then this one here is, I think, a 95, but this is, you can kind of see the evolution. It was like, you kind of buy the one that's available, whereas this one is arguably one of the very, very nicest on the market.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, it's been interesting. Delta Integrales. I mean, we are in a golden era. And you can see that with what's coming out of the shows. You can see that with, everyone being so excited for the 90s.
I guess those cars weren't ever sold in the US. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's
the appeal.
That, I think, makes them the holy grail. You can get the nicer versions. We've done a lot of somehow 993s, where they're very similar to the European version. The bumpers or something are a little different, but so many Germans in that period were ordering individual cars.
Yeah.
So they're getting purple paint with purple interior and just crazy upgrades and individual parts or finishings. They're not buying them because they're so different, just really cool specs.
Yeah.
But things like E36 BMW variants, the Tourings, we never got the station wagons or the estates. So those are different, and that's why it makes them desirable, I guess.
Cool.
But yes, to your point, 25 years is for safety and regulations. Once you hit 25 years, America goes, hey, remember all those rules about airbags, seatbelts, big bumpers? Forget it. It doesn't matter. Just do what you want. And then our emissions is 21 years to make it even weirder. So we can bring the engine in when it's 21 years old, and we can bring the body in when it's 25 years old. So
at that point, you don't have an annual test or an MOT or something. Is that right? Or
every state is different. You have the MOT there, which is, in our mind, ridiculously strict. Brake bias testing. Whereas in my state, our emissions and safety testing is not strict relatively, but the brakes might involve pulling the car in and making sure it stopped before you drive into the workshop wall.
Blimey.
And then you put it up on the lift and you look at pad depth.
Yeah.
And the same with tires. They'll do a visual inspection of the sidewalls. Really, they're checking tire depth for tread. And then emissions is you really don't have this. When we plug in a scan tool, it checks 8 points and just says yes or no.
Okay.
That's it. So it checks your O2 sensors there. Is your catalytic converter by the manufacturer test okay? Secondary air injection. And so if you happen to have a tune on your car that happens to just set all of those to yes, then their computer just sees 8 yeses and you're fine. And even funnier, in our state, you can have 1 or 2 bad. They can fail on 10, 15% of it and it doesn't matter. And then a lot of other states have nothing. Literally 0.
Wow.
So a different world.
Maybe not all for the good, I guess. But
I mean, all right, I'll sidetrack this. No one has some like sort of socioeconomical beliefs about it, because you will be driving in more rural states and you will see a front fender that's rusted out on the bottom. And they're driving on the motorway and it's just flapping because it's still bolted at the top, but it's flapping in the wind. And so I'm like, maybe they don't know when they stop, it probably falls down into a similar place. And they're just like, oh, okay. But then it puts, and this is where I get slightly weird about it, then it puts it up to the police to stop them.
Oh, okay.
And that person will then get a ticket for not safe vehicle, are they allowed to continue driving, etc. So now not only do they have to pay for a fine, but they have to pay for the repairs.
Yeah.
And I think that can maybe snowball if you have a tire that's below, etc. If that's your only car to get to work, then there could be an avalanche of repercussions.
Yeah.
So now you see how my brain works. So I drive around thinking when I see someone driving that, and of course it's ridiculously unsafe for other road users, but that person may not be aware of that. A normal person doesn't think, oh, how are my brake pad depth this year?
Yeah.
Or they don't walk around their car looking at all 4 tires. So anyway, that's the good and bad of America, and I just made this political, so I'm going to retreat from that quickly.
If we go back to you kind of being a kid in your parents' cars, are you an only child or have you got siblings? Or
I have a younger brother in West London.
Okay. And did your parents have music on in the car? Did they smoke? Did you do kind of a lot of road trips as kids? Or
Oh, all right. Yeah, the smoking. 80s in Britain. But no, I don't think in the car, really. I don't know. It was just whatever. Not to call out one of my parents. I won't say which one because they would be flabbergasted.
John's dad ran a newsagent and had a fairly healthy habit. Or not healthy.
Yeah. No, it's like a smoke machine in Dad's Merc.
It's amazing how that's changed. In the UK, you really don't see kind of adults smoking so much, I feel like. Whereas in Germany and places, it's just everywhere and in the taxis or whatever. But yes, music. I listened to headphones a lot. Basically, my dad would listen to like the Top Gear soundtrack. Like there was a whole bunch of Dire Straits, etc., which was great. Genesis, things like that. I'm sure they're yelling at me if they're listening. Be like, no, we listen to all of this other stuff. But and then road trips. Somehow, way back in the early 80s, mid 80s, my grandparents started going to Spain, which I think was way ahead of the time. Like I don't think Spain was even properly democracy. And so they went to like this little town, which now is, it's on the east. Lots of British people go there. But we would drive there.
From Scotland?
That would have been, Scotland, or it would have been England. We'd fly sometimes, but I remember road tripping through France, and my dad was very regimented about the driving in a really nice way. Looking back, I realized how hard my dad worked and how much they both sacrificed to give me and my brother time and things.
Yeah.
And you can ask for more out of 2 people than that.
Yeah.
And the way they would drive, we'd be up first thing in the morning, drive until the hottest part of the day, no air conditioning. Even when we're like, oh, my dad drove a BMW, like it didn't have factory AC. I think it had leaky windows, but like, that was it. So, and we drive to like a Novotel. That was it. Like go in the swimming pool in the afternoon, and then the next day drive another 6-7 hours. And just take 4 days to get to Spain or something. And I would sit in the back listening to, now that's what I call music.
Yeah.
First on my cassette, gotta make myself sound old, and then my Discman. And so, yeah, there's some terrible 90s, mid-90s, just like British or Euro beat songs with a like powerful female singer that are just so memory-inducing. And my brother saying he was melting because we'd be in the back in the southern French heat with no AC. So, yeah, that's really fun memories.
Awesome. Yeah, I like stories like that. Kind of, you sort of put those things to the back of your mind, you forget about them. But yeah, when we start kind of talking about this, you're like, oh yeah, and that, and this, and
I think about those all the time. Like you'll tell from my storytelling that my brain just bounces all over the place every day. So I'll be walking outside and be like, oh, remember that road trip?
So have you ended up owning any cars specifically because your parents or your grandparents had them? Was that what the Volkswagen thing was about?
No, I owned a Mark III Ford Fiesta when I was in the UK. I had a Kawasaki AR50. My dad loved motorbikes, and that's what he tinkered with. And then it was his side hustle when he was young, was rebuilding bikes. And then, okay, there's a dad story. All right, I'm going to sidetrack. Bring me back in a moment. So he lived in a Scottish Paisley, west of Glasgow high-rise.
Okay.
And it was really not a lot of money in the family. So I got the stories of, well, I'd buy a broken motorbike, but I then had to take it upstairs. So I would take it apart and carry it. I don't know if there was a lift or not. And he would take it up to his bedroom and rebuild it there, then take it downstairs and reassemble it, and then ride it and sell it.
Jesus.
And then finally, he did get a shared lockup. I don't know if he had a moped that would get him to there, and then the motorbikes would be there. But either way, it was uphill both ways. And I was always like, oh, this is, story. The stories when I was young never really made sense or excited me.
Yeah.
And then a number of years ago, we were talking about, my friend has a lathe and he was working on a part, but it's 3-phase, which he didn't have. So he put a drill on the end of it, and his friend just held on this drill and whipped around by this lathe, and it worked. And my dad said, oh yeah, I had a manual powered lathe. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, it's from a submarine. What? And it was him and his brother. Scotland was building a lot of ships and submarines, and everything apparently in a submarine had to be self-sustaining. So if you're in the middle of the ocean somewhere and the power goes out and you need to machine a part, you had to have no power machines. And so they would have lathes that could be human operated.
Yeah.
And so they went and bought one of these surplus lathes at the docks in Glasgow or Govan or wherever. And they hooked up a motor from a washing machine to it. Like, Dad, I wish no one when you're really young is like, oh, I really appreciate these stories, and I really like you're really cool, Dad. And now I'm like, oh, that's really, really cool.
My grandpa, just a quick diversion, he was an engineer. He used to teach people kind of how to do engineering. But in his garage, when we cleared that out when he passed away, he had a treadle operated lathe. So it had like a pedal, like an old fashioned sewing machine type thing. That was like the heaviest thing in the world. But yeah, my dad brought that back. I think he hooked some sort of motor up to it. But yeah, that was kind of, sorry, keep going.
That's exactly it. That's literally it. Like, they were human operated. Yeah. Wild, the things that we did not know about. And then, yeah. So I guess that really was a thing. Like, if your granddad and my dad did it, like, everyone's just finding these manual lathes.
I can't believe your dad was lifting bits of motorbike up some stairs. He must have had arms like Popeye or something.
I mean, yeah, they were whatever, Bantams or whatever. I have no idea. Whatever the coolest bikes were, the cafe racers, like, that was what my dad was doing back in the 60s or whatever. They're cool. Like, I think it's, when you're young, you don't appreciate it, and I'm glad to kind of have a rekindled, appreciation for them while they're here and driving their Volkswagens with BBS 2-piece wheels around.
Is that your influence back on them? You got them into cars, so to speak, rather than the other way around, or?
No. They got me into cars. They're both car people. Everyone in the family is kind of a car person. But it was, go for a walk on a Sunday afternoon. Like, oh, there's a car show, we'll go to it. I grew up southern England, and I learned to drive at the TRL,
Yeah.
the Transportation Research Laboratory, because we lived in the village. And so they would let local kids go and learn how to drive because it's a whole town set up. And that was the home of Inters.
Yeah.
So the GTI International show. And I always remember my dad being like, oh, we should borrow the next door neighbor's Passat and go drag race it because they'll let you in. But we never went. We never actually went to the show. So I remember all the modified cars and things coming into town once a year, but I was, 12 or something. But we never went. But I grew up always going to Brooklands and going to museums, and the same with my grandfather. So, really big car people, but were never worked in the car industry or something. So then jumping back, 4 thoughts. No, I had a Ford Fiesta, Kawasaki AR50. The AR50 got nicked because Britain. And then, so then I was back to the bus and back to my bicycle. I love riding my bike everywhere. Regret in life, being 13 years old, I should have built up the trust to ask that I just going to ride my bike across France or Britain. Like, I just wish I'd ridden and ridden and ridden. So anyway, I bought a 1-liter Ford Fiesta, modified it, did a motor swap, which in the UK you need to register.
Yeah.
Because your tax changes or whatever. I never did. When I moved to America, I gave it to my brother and they scrapped it or they sold it for parts. Because I think my parents are like, this motor swap is not good. And, I'd started gutting it. I don't think I had a back seat or anything. So they kept the steering wheel and the radio out of it, which I still have in my cars now.
Okay.
And I bought another 1-liter Mark III Fiesta base model, not an RS Turbo, not an XR2i, shipped it over, and it's got the original Fiesta head unit, the Kenwood mask, sitting here in America. Right-hand drive, completely pointless. But when I first moved to America, Volkswagens were the only cars I recognized. There was a Mark III Vauxhall Astra sold here as a Daewoo.
Yeah, they did the same here.
Yeah, but it's like a really bad, cheap knockoff, official knockoff.
It's like a jelly mold, isn't it? Like they've rounded every edge.
A tiny bit, but it's just like there was just a bad car. No offense to them. I don't know if anyone's stoic or whatever. But I think they sold it here as a Pontiac or something.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure. Pontiac Le Mans, I believe.
Oh, wow.
But nothing to do with Opel or... Anyway, so I would have bought one of those if I'd found it. I didn't. Bought a Mark I Golf instead, broken a few $100s. And that was it for Volkswagen. And now my mom and dad regularly read PVW magazine. My mom has a beige on beige Beetle convertible, like a 2007-ish.
Yeah. On
BBS RX2 wheels. So she's got 18-inch split rims on it. And we got her color match center caps, so knockoff, but aftermarket made beige with the gold center cap. So my mum was like styling.
Fantastic.
Is there like a big thirst? Obviously there is because of what you do, Jamie, but is there a big thirst for like these cars that were never available in the US? Obviously they're not British built cars, a lot of them, they're all from sort of different parts of Europe, but I'm just intrigued as to how people are kind of finding out about, I guess, like the social media explosion. People are seeing all these vehicles on various things, but
yes, there definitely is. But to me, going back to Performance VW magazine, before Instagram, even before VW Vortex, PVW was such a trendsetter. And I mean, we had the Brit look, a Mark II Golf with big bumpers, lowered, wide wheels. Like, we've always looked to the other cultures for that. And I think Britain has always been, pretty up on that. And then the same with the car culture in the UK. So I think a lot of people, Top Gear. Look at the exports, the trend setting.
Yeah.
So I think people here have always been very aware. And English as a first language helps a lot too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But people have always looked to Britain. So a lot of those cars do have cult followings here. Sierra Cosworths, things like that. Escort Cosworths. They're dream cars in a lot of countries, but they're ones that Britain really kind of owned and took under itself. I mean, I'll shout out Britain.
I guess we're spoilt a little bit here, aren't we? Because we grew up with it. Like we've just seen them day to day.
Sure, but then, Drive to Survive. I mean, Formula One is British.
Mm.
Whether it is or not, I mean, FIA, etc., not, but most of the teams are based there, and you're like, you're a German team. Why are you in Middle England? So I think that, and then all the stories of Gordon Murray and everyone, all of these kind of heroes and things. So no, there is definitely a thirst for it, and then it's an easy way to get some of those really cool cars. Some people do or don't like right-hand drive. I think right now, try not to get political, your used car market is pretty depressed compared to the rest of Western Europe. I think Brexit kind of changed that. The value of the pound changed it. And then right-hand drive, people that are stereotypically buying up the cars, whether it used to be Poland, and now it's maybe more Romania, etc. Not being political, I think that is just economics, but they don't want right-hand drive cars.
Yeah.
And people are no longer coming to Britain to work and taking cars home with them, or going back at Christmas and driving a car and leaving it. So I do think that your used car market pricing is depressed, maybe not so as on purpose as Japan. I think Japan is built. Japanese exports are so famous, but it's a small place.
Can't they only keep their cars for 10 years or something silly like that?
Yeah, I mean, their tax goes up. You have to want to keep an old car and you got to pay for it. But that's really built as, I mean, look at the parallel and differences between two island countries with not a very big population, loves new cars. One of them has one of the biggest car industries on the globe, and the other one has nothing. Being polite. If you round to the nearest whole number.
Yeah. What went wrong? What did they do differently?
Yeah, you've got Lotus, which isn't owned by whatever. You've got Bentley, which is owned by whatever. You've got Jaguar. Like, there's, going back to Margaret Thatcher, etc. Britain's car industry literally died. Okay, again, rounding to the nearest whole point. You're at 1% or 0.1% of what it was, whereas Japan, strength to strength.
Yeah.
And I think Japan is set up for exporting cars, whereas the UK wasn't. So I can go into more thoughts on that. But so yes, we do definitely look at European cars, and Britain's the easy one to look at. Whereas other people look at JDM and they look at Japan, and it's that simple.
Yeah, definitely. Do you recall kids from school having kind of cars of interest, like their parents driving stuff, and you're thinking, that's really cool, or equally, that's really rubbish?
So, yeah, all right. In the neighborhood, you knew who had what cars. Me and my friend were probably 12 or something. He had a wooden go-kart, and we strapped his mom's vacuum cleaner on it, and we would go around door to door asking if you wanted your car cleaned.
Okay.
And that was how we made money as well. So we'd wash cars, and you always kind of knew who had what. And I will never forget, I don't remember his name. My next door neighbor was a pilot, and he always had BMW E30 M3s.
Nice.
And they were always on BBSs. I assume RSs, but I'm not that specific to remember. But I think they had the bolts.
Yeah.
And this was like, early 90s. So these cars were maybe a year or two old. And the story we heard, or that I remember, was he would fly to Germany working, buy the car and drive it home, because it was cheaper to import them from Europe than to buy it in the UK, or they weren't available, or whatever the reason was.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget, and I'm sitting here looking at a BBS RS sitting in my office. He wouldn't let me wash his cars. Why not? And now I'm like, oh, we were probably using the same grit from the previous car in the bottom of the bucket and going around.
Yeah.
And we would have this marketing thing of like, pay us what you think it's worth. Because they'd be like, how much you want? And you're like, oh, £1. He'd be like, oh, sure. He'd be like, £10. He'd be like, no way. So we do a good job and actually care about it, because my dad would wash his cars, whatever. I'd learned a little. And they'd be like, oh, you did an amazing job. Here's £15 or whatever. And we're like,
yeah,
we're rich. But I remember him with his toothbrush, and he would sit there and clean between the spokes of the wheels. And I just remember, like, what a weirdo. Like, and like, you're not letting me wash your car either. You don't want to give the kid next door £1 or whatever. And now here I am with the BBSs, and I sit there, and if I'm traveling and there is a toothbrush in the hotel room, I'm like, oh, I'll take that for my wheels. Yeah.
That guy must have had like a look into the future or something, knowing about E30 M3s being desirable and swirl marks with sponges and grit and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, he was on it, and I did not appreciate it in the slightest. And now I want to be like, I don't know where you are, I don't know what you're doing, but like, you were super freaking cool. Like, you were ultra cool, or you were indeed a complete nerd, and you have passed on the wheel nerd. So that's my earliest memory of like, oh, that guy's a car weirdo. And now I look in the mirror and I'm like, yeah, right there with you.
Remember the garage that my dad used to use when I was a kid? The garage was called VRV, and the owner used to drive around a grey E30 M3. I think it's like an Evo one with like the full kit. And the number plate was VRV1 as a left-hand drive. And I used to see it and just think, even back then, I wasn't sort of knowledgeable about cars, but you could just tell that's a special car. Don't know what happened to it. I should punch that number plate into the old MOT checker and see what it's on nowadays.
Probably on something that's worth less than the car. Do you ever see personal number plates and you go, that number plate's worth more than your car? And it's on like a, Ford Fiesta or something. It's a 4-digit plate and you're like, what?
Exactly. Yeah.
I tried to try down my grandparents' cars, but they always had the same 2 number plates. And supposedly the rule was, back in the day, you couldn't sell or transfer them. You had to own the car. So my granddad bought his initials with the number 3 after it on a Ford Anglia or something.
Yeah.
And he parked it out the back of the house in a field for the 6 months or whatever the requirement was to take the plate off of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the personal plates make it really hard to track down an individual car because you don't know when they sold it what was reassigned. For non-UK people, car number plates stay with the car for the life of it unless you transfer it off. So, and there's a great lookup website, so you can go and see of this car when it was last inspected, which is a phenomenal system. We do not have that here, and there's not many other places in the rest of the world that. Holland's okay. But yeah, that really is something really cool about the UK car scene.
I've just punched in VRV1 into the MOT checker, and this is quite possibly the most disappointing thing I've ever seen, but it's on a Volkswagen Passat registered in 2012, diesel.
And that was a company car for sure. But that's the bummer that you can't now find the original car that you remember it on.
Yeah.
The other thing, I guess, with data protection is that you can't be put in touch with whoever's got that vehicle. It's probably the same over there, but if you then wanted to try and find that car, you're just clutching at straws. It could be anywhere.
Yes and no.
Okay.
So, all right, going off the deep end. In the UK, you don't have really ownership documents. You have a V5 document.
Yeah.
Which says on the front in really big letters, this is not proof of ownership. This is proof of the registered keeper. What weirds me out is that you can just write in and get one.
That's true.
So I'm always like, so somebody could just take my car and just write in and be like,
oh, yeah, I guess so.
I want the registered documents. I'm like, so then can't you work out by that who the previous owner was or something? I'm like, that.
The DVLA is a very mysterious and murky place, Jamie, with that weird address that it's got. Just DVLA postcode.
Swansea.
Off goes your letter and it gets there.
Something right to Santa.
That's the one, yeah.
I don't know if I should bite on talking about it being in Wales because you're like, it's in Swansea. Like, so again, for people that don't know, it's in southern Wales, which is a separate country, like Scotland, or I'm not even going to touch on Ireland, but it was really famous for coal mining, etc. And it kind of felt with the DVLA, they were like, we need to send some work there. And so the entire database of everything car related goes to a random town, city in Wales. I don't know what else Swansea's famous for.
Is that true? Was the DVLA started in Swansea or it was moved there? I've never heard that.
I don't know, but an entire government office being moved to a fairly random place. I'm not trying to talk beep or negatively, but that was what I'd always kind of been told, that, yep, they needed some industry. Like, again,
here you go.
Can't bring up Margaret Thatcher 3 times in the pub. All right, so Maggie Thatcher went and shut down. Do you know? You're probably not know. I vividly remember, and it was really, I must have been like 2 or 3, so I don't know why I remember this. When they shut down the coal mines or when they went on strike, I remember people driving food and clothing to the Welsh valleys, to the villages, because they had no income anymore.
Okay.
And that they literally would send that over. And the stories were, this came up with Ukraine, that a Ukrainian coal mine sent aid to the Welsh families, and then they returned the favor during the conflict, during the war now.
Yeah.
That Welsh village sent stuff over and said, we never forgot that we were like, kind of the communists were sending us aid against our own government. But going back to the DVLA, it's this big, everyone knows the address, that it's just Drive Vehicle Licensing A agency, Swansea, and that's it. But that was the rumor or story I've been told, that it was like, well, we took away their entire industry, so we're just going to give them an anonymous government office, and here's an agency for you to go run.
Yeah, so it's a mystery, isn't it?
We need to try and get someone on from the DVLA, I think.
You can apply in writing, sir.
Yeah.
Well, I've off-topic this quite enough.
Yeah, fantastic. A lot of people obviously doing what you do. Could you suggest someone who you think we should speak to? Anyone who's a bit nerdy about the cars they grew up with, or maybe isn't nerdy about it but likes talking?
Don't say Thatcher.
She's got a bit quiet recently.
Yeah, very quiet.
Yes. Yeah. I'm not making this political. I have nothing pro or negative. Like, I love to travel. I love to, meet people and to, learn about their backgrounds and stuff. So if I have to pass the baton, I would say somebody from South Africa.
Okay.
Or Australia or Poland. If you want a very enthusiastic, whereas I am like somewhat sarcastic or whatever. Vic Pardell from South Africa. We brought him up last year. He came up for my show. And he does emceeing for VDub Camp Fest down there.
Okay.
He is a Energizer bunny of excitement and positivity and everything like that. So he's really great, and he's very, from humble beginnings in SA. So he would be a good one. And then, there's just so many people. I'm going to go visit the guys from DSP in France.
Okay, yeah.
They built some wild PVW style cars back in the day.
They did a Gullwing Golf, didn't they? Mark 1 Speedster.
And 2 and 3, like Gullwing, everything. And it's funny seeing how his brain works. So he brought his Mark III for my show here in the US last year, and it's Gullwing doors on a Mark III, but it's also got a Porsche 968, maybe I'm wrong on that. Is that even a model?
Yeah, 968 is, yeah.
I think it had 968 dashboard, seats, everything. 964, whatever. It had full Porsche interior, like unbelievable. So David is that guy. And I'm sure just from his kind of quiet persona with sort of fewer words, I feel like he actually has some really cool stories. But for entertainment and volume, I'm really, I've been so lucky to go to South Africa so many times, and there's so many amazing, beautiful people there, and such car culture. The rest of the world is sleeping on the special editions and things that South Africa's had over the years. They love factory hot rods. So that would be my suggestion, kind of head, further afield.
Well, look him up. Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us, Jamie. I do really appreciate it. I'm not trying to get rid of you. We try and squeeze this into a lunch break. So,
so by me being late, which we did not talk about at the beginning.
We didn't know.
Nope, well, I've outed myself on that. All right, well, go work. I will go and do the same. Yeah,
cool. I really appreciate it. Look after yourself, mate.
Thank you. Take care.
And I'll see you again, soon-ish.
Yeah, thanks.
See you later. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Cool. There we go. I think that was worth hanging on for.
Yeah, absolutely. No, really interesting guy. with an interesting day job.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, it's not obviously it's not about his day job, but you can see a bit like how he's ended up there.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. No, some cool previous cars that his dad was involved with.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. I didn't know his dad still had the Elise.
No, that's a cool story. Can't be too many company car options that went down the Elise route.
No, I can't imagine so. That's a bit of a wild card, isn't it? I have to go for kind of your practical saloon. You like a Mondeo, sir, or a A4 or an Elise? But yeah, it's nice that he's going to take that on kind of when his dad's sort of finished with it.
Yeah,
and a bit of a touch, I guess, on mortality really for him, kind of thinking that his dad's obviously not getting any younger.
Yeah,
and I guess something we don't kind of have to worry about, so to speak. But it's refreshing, I guess, comforting in a way that people do kind of see that mortality in their parents, because far rather that than kind of people just take them for granted.
Yeah,
because they're not going to be there forever.
Yeah,
as we found out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that is kind of nice to see a little bit of emotion with that.
I guess there always comes a time with an Elise that you just can't get into it. I imagine I'd struggle now. I probably would have struggled when I was 21 because I'm so tall. But
yeah, I don't know whether I've ever been in one actually. But yeah, they're pretty small, aren't they? I think. Yeah, Joe, who came on episode 5, he had one for a bit.
Yeah, and
I think he sort of summed it up as basically it's a race car for the road.
Yeah, and
he sort of ended up going back to some sort of Mercedes coupe or cabriolet, I think, as a bit more of a practical toy. Because as much as it's fun, I don't think it's that fun when it's raining or you're not on a racetrack.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'll look the chap up from South Africa. We'll see if we can get him on. Yeah, good to hit another continent.
I was going to say, what's the time difference with? It's not too bad, is it?
I think they're fairly good because they're sort of in line with us.
Is it like 1 hour or so? Yeah.
Yeah, because sort of up and down, I don't think changes, does it? It's left and right, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed it. It was good to get Jamie on and carrying motorbikes upstairs.
Yeah.
To fix them in a flat. That's kind of it's good fun.
Yeah.
His grandparents' Mark 1 Scirocco, minis and metros, obviously we touched on earlier. Yeah, it was good. I really enjoyed it.
Definitely. Yeah.
And nice to get him on and continue our international guest list, I suppose.
Yeah, I think Jamie's definitely one of those where you could just speak all day, couldn't you? Really, and go on and on.
Yeah, loads of tangents, wasn't there?
1980s politics.
Yes. Cool. Thank you very much, John.
Right. All right, mate.
We'll wrap it up and roll the credits.
Thank you for listening to My Dad's Car. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please support us. Buy us a coffee and subscribe. And tell all your friends.